This book is called There's a Hole in the Bucket. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole. Mend the hole in the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Mend the hole in the bucket, dear Georgie, mend the hole. With what shall I mend it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I mend it, dear Liza? With what? With a straw, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a straw, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a straw. The straw is too long, dear Liza, dear Liza. The straw is too long, dear Liza, too long. Then cut it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Then cut it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, cut it. With what shall I cut it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I cut it, dear Liza? With what? With a knife, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a knife, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a knife. The knife is too blunt, dear Liza, dear Liza. The knife is too blunt, dear Liza, too blunt. Then wet it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Then wet it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, wet it. With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I wet it, dear Liza? With what? With a stone, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a stone, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a stone. The stone is too dry, dear Liza, dear Liza. The stone is too dry, dear Liza, too dry. Then wet the stone, then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With the stone, then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, wet it. With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I wet it, dear Liza? With what? With water, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With water, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, water. With what shall I get it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I get it, dear Liza? With what? In the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. In the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, bucket. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole.